Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a wonderful day, albeit it hasn't been particularly long since I last saw you, and some of you will have just watched maybe transfer plans that I put out yesterday. Talking about that video, it's my best performing video to date, so for that, I'm very grateful. Thank you for all your support and love from last game week. Today, I have for you everything you need to know. We will talk about the forwards, we will talk about defenders, we'll talk about midfielders. Should you sell Mbeumo? Should you sell Bruno? The replacements, Bowen versus Kudus, and of course, the big one, as always, captaincy, and a few other things as well. If you have not subscribed, consider doing so. Instead of me saying 40% of you who watch regularly haven't subscribed, I actually went and checked last night, and it's now 39.6. So that's progress. If we just do 0.1, 0.2% a day, and you just ship into that, that would be absolutely magnificent. Very close now to 5K subs following the support in the last few days. So that would be great to hit. But without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. I must say, I certainly am enjoying the game in the state that it's in, because each and every week I actually have to think about captaincy. It's not like last year where I had to go Haaland, and then I get to produce a section, which is probably maybe my favorite section of the week. 4 candidates for me: Salah, Saka, Jackson, Palmer. Jackson, some of you will be surprised that he's here. I just had a lot of questions about him. People were like, oh, can I go him instead of Palmer due to the fixture? So I thought I'd touch on that. Let's start with Mo Salah. Right. What I think Newcastle are going to do is take a somewhat similar approach to how they've taken the game against Manchester City, especially given the form that Liverpool are in. Against Manchester City, they went high to high, man-to-man, high press, and then transitioned into a 5-4-1 with Joelinton slotting into this almost like left centre-back role. Now, I'm not sure they go man-to-man against Liverpool, because I think, for me, Liverpool's build-up in terms of the personnel is better than City's. I know that's a weird statement to make considering what City have done over the recent years, but like having Walker, for example, I think takes away from that with the utmost respect. I don't think Diaz is as good on the ball as someone like Van Dijk. I also think, given Liverpool's structure, where loads of teams build with a 3-2 now and they build with a 4-2, having Trent like narrow as well helps you a lot. Ryan Gravenberch has been magnificent at receiving in the pivot, and so has Alexis McAllister when they form a 4-2 as opposed to a 4-1. So for all of those reasons, I don't think they'll go man-to-man. I think as opposed to that, they'll go to block passes into the pivot through the blocking passing lanes, or just be a little bit behind the fullbacks, or in front of the fullbacks and behind the pivots, ready to jump, similar to how like Caicedo and Lavia were yesterday against Aston Villa, which I'm going to show you in a bit of graphic analysis. So that's what I think is going to happen, and I think therefore there is an increased likelihood or an increased volume of diagonals that Van Dijk hits into Salah, especially because the 1v1 matchup there is Lewis Hall versus Salah, and Lewis Hall's not getting the better of him physically. I really like him as a player, but I just think Liverpool maybe go a little bit longer, a little bit more often. I think Nunes plays considering he doesn't start, and he looks to stretch that space in behind as well. And then maybe one of the eights, like if it's Jones or Sabaz, I can look to pick up that space in and around there that was provided by that run. So I think they go along a little bit more. I probably think it's maybe a little bit worse for Salah, because I think going direct to a Newcastle side in general, especially at their ground, potentially favors what they want more, a bit more of a physical aerial battle. That's just how I think the game's going to go. I still expect them to win, but slight change in build-up, I can see maybe reducing the volume of chances Liverpool create, or at least the quality of them. So that's one thing. And now I'm just going to show you the 5-4-1, which I think Newcastle transition into, and why I think that's not the best thing for Salah. When I say not the best thing for Salah, I probably should have specified in terms of goal threat. I think now, against this type of 5-4-1, which you can see there, he becomes a creative source, and the guys who are going to be making those runs into those half spaces are going to be the 8s, and maybe even like Diaz or Gakpo on that left flank. Kind of similar to the goal he scored, the first goal they scored yesterday, where Salah's looking to put in like such a brilliant ball, and he did that a few times, not every time he was rewarded with an assist, like one Diaz fluffed his lines. And I think maybe he turns into a even more creative outlet than he usually is. So that's just something to consider. You can see the structure here. You can see where Joelinton is here. He's next to Haaland on that thing on the picture in that left centre back channel. And I think you'll probably get Salah pulling a little bit just to receive and then. So I just thought I'd show the image. So for that reason, whilst that transitional threat will still be there in a game like this, because Newcastle are at home, and that's always going to be on offer for you. Whilst he's arguably, if not definitely, the best player in the league at the moment, and Liverpool are on fire, you've got all of those positives, and I appreciate that. But when you consider the negatives associated, given what I presented, and the opportunity cost given who Palmer and Jackson play, I think it's better to have him at like 2 or 3 and then go for one of the guys with the better fixtures. Saka's an interesting one. Probably some of you aren't even considering him. And I assure you, this is not just because he scored an 18-pointer last week. I actually had it on him, I think prior to the West Ham game, and I was going to go here, and then you'll see what happens after I watched Chelsea. I think playing 5 at the back against for someone like Saka in their dynamic is a little bit different to Liverpool, because you haven't really seen Trent overlapping basically at all this season. You've seen Salah holding the width. Obviously, Saka does hold the width, but Timber's definitely supporting it more. You've also got a creative on his right side, which Salah doesn't have in terms of Martin Odegaard. And I think against the back 5, I really like overloading the middle, especially when the wing back on that flank doesn't have significant transitional threat, and I don't think Dallo does. Diallo definitely does on the opposite flank, but on the Saka side, I think he could definitely come inside a little bit more and stay there when he's in those zones to manufacture something whereby he could score, to leverage the ball striking. I think it's a lot easier. And everything's probably just going to run through him, especially if he's more central as well. It'll be interesting to see what Odegaard does. Maybe he just drops into the like deeper pockets and second phase just a bit more, just to get that build up, ticking and ticking and ticking, and have an option to go back and then recycle very quickly. So that'll be interesting. That's basically my positives for Saka. The negatives are that, of course, it is still a back 5, and that's probably not the most optimal or most ideal conditions that you're ever going to get, nor is the fact that it's Man United, who are coming off a 4-0 win. They'll be full of confidence. And, of course, like, United have a lot of quality, right? You can say what you want about them, you can say what you want about their performances, but the players themselves, they've always got the ability to turn it on. So for me, I'll probably have him not at the bottom of this list. You'll see who's at the bottom of this list. But so we come on to my favorite, and it is not Nicholas Jackson. Now, some people were eyeing that up and saying, could I captain him over him? And I think you can. And I'm not necessarily going to say anything bad about him. It's more so that I just trust Cole Palmer. In a week like this, I don't know exactly how that Southampton-Chelsea game is going to play out. I don't know the exact approach Russell Martin's going to use. I also think when there's unknowns present and you're tossing between 2 players for the same team, going for the midfielder in general is always better, because extra point for the goal, clean sheet. Palmer's better on the bonus system. He has more avenues to point. He's also a better player. I think his expected minutes will be slightly better. Maybe Nkunku and Jackson just play 70-20 again. So for me, I'm going to go Palmer over Jackson and stick Jackson at 4th, because the other two are firing on all cylinders and they have every single thing going for them. I think it is a very unnecessary risk to take on all 3 of these guys. You're going to have to take on 2 of them regardless, but in this week, I wouldn't take on all 3 of them. There'll be spots for it, but just not this one. What do I like so much about Cole Palmer? Because, like I said, I was on Saka even before the West Ham game. So what made me change? Well, there are a few things. One, Enzo Maresca moving him back to the right side. And you saw with his goal what happened. If he's on the left side there, and like it's almost switched, and Enzo, I know it's from a free kick, but like if it was switched and he was on the left and Enzo was in that same pocket, that's not happening, right? And he's not scoring that goal from the left side because his right foot isn't as good as whipping that ball into that top corner from mirrored area, right? So having him back on the right side, and I think the left-hand side experiment's done for a while at least. Maybe against Spurs, if Malagusta inverts all the way into that right 8, but for now I think we're okay. So that certainly improves him. The press, which we're going to come on to, and that's one of the biggest reasons that I'm picking him, which I'll show you in the next slide. Suspensions, there's no Finn Downs, Aaron Ramsdale's not available, there's no Harwood Bellis, and there's no Tyler Dibbling. Tyler Dibbling is a huge loss because now it's so much more difficult to get out. You saw against Brighton, you see against Liverpool, you saw against pretty much everyone. His ability to carry, magnificent. He's so strong at his age. I remember watching the City-Southampton game, and some of the things he was doing, the way he was carrying, the way he was holding people off, was magnificent, especially at his age. So I think that out is gone for Southampton. That's a big deal, and they're probably just going to face waves and waves and waves of pressure. And if Chelsea have one of those days where it just clicks, it could get a little bit ugly. And then their 5-4-1's decent, but at times lacks a little bit of compactness. I feel like you can stretch them a little bit with quick passing side to side and then create pockets. And we've got players who can really hurt you, specifically Palmer, the one I'm talking about. But even Enzo in his form has been really, really good. So that's that. Let me show you the press on what I'm talking about and the direct route to points that I think Palmer may have. Right, so this happened continuously against Aston Villa. Now, maybe I've just missed it for the entire time, and I probably have. But I seriously took note of this yesterday, and there are a few things that I really like about it, especially against Southampton, where I think Cole Palmer can profit. This is like a 3-2-4-1 press. Behind this image, you would have a Caicedo Lavia, a pivot, which would essentially block, not even if they weren't blocking the pass, the guys who were willing to receive, they would jump straight on them as soon as they got the ball. And then you'd also have Colwell, who's willing to step in with Rodgers all the way and track him just to make sure he can turn and then face goal and explode past him, because that's what Rodgers' best skill set is. The first thing I want to note is Nicholas Jackson. It's very common when you press, and you'll see this with a lot of sides, for the guy just to press front on, especially when he's pressing the goalkeeper, and just force him to play the pass, right? And then try maybe once in 1,000 times to capitalize on a mistake. However, what Jackson did repeatedly yesterday was he pressed from the goalkeeper's right-hand side and the screen's left, essentially, as if you were watching the game. Why is that important? Well, let's just assume that every goalkeeper is right-footed. They're not, but like 95% of them are. Okay, or like 90%. When the ball is always going to be on your right foot because you're right-footed. It's just a natural, unconscious thing that you're going to. Therefore, the leg, right? The leg is straighter, meaning that to go long, it's harder because to go long, you need a serious, like you need the leg to bend, and then that's the only way you can generate the power. The leg's extended in its full position, thus straight, and that's if you wanted to go long. There's an extra split second and action that he would have to complete, like a micro level action to go long. Okay, so just in general, you're more inclined to play out. The other thing is, and the big thing, Russell Martin is so insistent on his players playing out. And we saw that against Liverpool. It doesn't really matter what happens, they're going to do it. If it fails a couple of times, the crowd will get on their back. People will get a bit nervous. They don't even have a settled one at the moment, settled number one, because Ramsdale's not playing. And they're just going to continuously do that, right? Play, 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 play. Jackson pressing on the left almost forces this to an even greater extent. And with this Chelsea press, especially even if you bypass I'm going to call it the first line, the Palmer line as opposed to the Jackson line, you have so much aggression that you have to deal with to keep the ball that those turnovers, those high turnovers, I think could happen, not in abundance, but quite a few times in the game. And that is a brilliant way for Palmer to profit because in general, in those situations, you kind of just look to find your best player. And I think those are always brilliant shooting opportunities because you don't think too much, right? Everything's just kind of happening in a second and it's almost off instinct. And he's shown himself to have one of the best instincts in the Premier League and just putting people away from that position. So I think in terms of high turnovers, specifically with the angle Jackson presses at, and the insistence that Russell Martin has on playing out the back, this particular route to points could be really good as opposed to Palmer obviously finding pockets in and around that block. One thing I thought was interesting against Villa is Villa did a decent job of reducing the space in between the lines, and I would have liked him to actually come out those lines a little bit more and receive a bit deeper just to get himself in the game and just for him to have more impact on the game. I wouldn't be surprised if he does that against Southampton if we're struggling as well. So, like, just in terms of getting things going, I think we should be fine, and that's about it. I think it's not a slam dunk, but it's a very healthy argument to justify a Palmer captaincy opposed alongside all of the obviouses like how good he is, how well he's playing, the fixture, etc. One of the bigger questions this week, if not the biggest one, is should you sell Brian Mbeumo and should you sell Bruno Fernandes? I'm going to start with Bruno because I think it's a lot easier. He's expensive and the fixtures are rough. Like Arsenal away, Forest at home, City away is rough. Even with City's form, you can say what you like about them. And honestly, I think people are taking them way too lightly at the moment. They've been so unnecessarily disrespectful and I'll come back to bite them. But regardless, for me, has to go. Just too expensive at that price and acts as a blocker. Because realistically, what's his ceiling in Arsenal away, in Forest at home, in City away, as a set, it's low. It is undoubtedly low. Even the floor is low because they're playing two teams that are definitely better than them. And then one team that's above them in the table because they've been better than them this year. So that's that. I'm not going to talk about that too much. I think that's pretty obvious for me. I know some people are holding him. I don't really get it because I think, well, I get it in the situations where you have like other fights to put out. Okay, fine, yeah, like Bruno Fernandes in the front three, and I was surprised you played there. Bruno Fernandes in the front three isn't the worst thing in the world to hold. However, if you don't have too many fires and you don't need to make too many other moves, I wouldn't be rolling. I would be playing with a bit of aggression here because there's a lot of upside to be had, downside to be avoided. Selling Mbeumo, my perspective has definitely shifted since I made the move. I was watching The Wire last night and Praz's team selection, and I think he put it wonderfully well and in a way that I hadn't thought about before. And I would definitely check out their channel, by the way. 3 great guys producing great content with great ranks to go with, and they've been doing it for so long. So definitely check out their content. It is a bit of a luxury. I probably didn't respect the fixtures enough on his side. Villa away with their form is not bad. Newcastle at home is interesting if they engage in a fairly transitional based game as opposed to going like 5-1 like they did against Palace for a time. Chelsea away, well, I mean, I think he scored a brace at the Bridge last year. That stupid goal at the end. And Chelsea will always give you a chance. That's the one thing. That's one of the reasons why I actually picked Sanchez, because the save volume is there because Chelsea always give you a chance. And then it's like Forest, which isn't great, but Brighton as well will give you a chance. So the fixtures are pretty decent. Now, I guess I was probably only thinking about him playing wide, but then is Thomas Frank going to go back to his quote-unquote big game structure with 3 at the back? Yeah, he might do. There's a decent chance. I don't think it's as much of a certainty as it would be early in the season, given what I've seen from them with the 4 and how aggressive they've been and how much I think he likes it. But that's certainly a possibility. He's also a 90-minute man on penalties and just a very, very, very good footballer in the Christmas period. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of backfires. But I do think that my Bowen will work. That's the justification for keeping him. What would be the justification for selling him? Well, you can talk about the fixtures from a stylistic standpoint, in the sense like I just have. But from a team quality standpoint, I think most people would still agree that whilst Aston Villa have gone through a bad bit of form, they're still a better side than Brentford. They could really do a Jacob Ramsey back. Amadou Onana for sure, but Jacob Ramsey, I think, is a huge, huge miss for them on that left side. I've spoken about how I'm not particularly impressed with the dynamics from those wide players and what they're offering. And I think Ramsey was just such a brilliant player. So that's that. Newcastle, I'd say that I'd still have them as a better side. Same with Chelsea, same with Forest, and same with Brighton. So there's that argument to be had that you kind of expect the greater quality in the side to get it done, albeit the margins aren't too big. Now, if you are to sell Brian and Mbeumo, and to conclude, I'm not like anywhere as bullish as I was early in the week on doing it. However, if you're to go to Bowen, I'm more on board with it. I think Bowen's just got 5 better fixtures than him. Each and every week, I would say his fixture's better. And he's cheap, or he's cheaper for me. He's probably the same price for you. Bowen's also a little bit of a flat track bully. Certainly not flat track bully. And West Ham have shown that tendency. If you look at their results against the better sides compared to the worst sides in the league, with all due respect, the disparity is huge because of the way they set up. They're so prone and susceptible to getting a good slapping from the better sides. But against the quote unquote worst sides, they have a lot of firepower, and the way they play, they'll create chances undoubtedly. So for me, I'm only going to say he's my favorite replacement. Him versus Kudus, I personally just prefer the fact that I'm getting, fine, he's more expensive, but I'm getting the talisman in that team. Penalties when Pacquiao's not on the pitch, which isn't that big of a deal, but I'm just getting someone super reliable. Like, he's done it year on year on year on year. And I've got a feeling that considering he hasn't really set the league alight this year, which is no fault of his own, players who have been around a while and are of a sufficient standard always tend to get themselves back to a certain set of numbers for their league season. And I think Bowen should be no different. So I'm expecting an upturn in performance. I know he'll be hungry for it as well. And the fixtures are there. With Kudus, look, he's got a lot going for him. The main thing being, like, he's probably the best player in that squad. He's an unbelievable footballer. I just think I'd rather have him playing on that right, which he's not going to do. And if he is playing on the right, then Bowen's going to be playing up top. And on the left, I don't like him as much as I do Bowen on the right. That's pretty much it. And like I said, I just trust Bowen more. A Tottenham mid, for me, no. Even though they've actually, like, Johnson and Maddison have been such good value this year. But with the expected minutes, I just refuse to pick it when there's other options. And that's just my justification, right? Expected minutes. And I also think spread of output, ceiling, and fixtures. So I found 3 other reasons. And whilst it'll probably keep ticking over, I'm just not doing it. I'm not exposing myself to that risk so unnecessarily. Semenyo, I really like. I don't have a single bad thing to say about him, apart from the fact that ceiling's not super high because spread of output, and in general, he's not the best finisher. But super cheap, great facilitator if you wanted to upgrade in the defense, which you will see why that's potentially a decent move. Yeah, I have nothing bad to say about him. I do about Mitoma, though. You probably have João Pedro, and even if you don't, top value, such good value. I know he's like 5'7" now. I picked him up like 5'4", but such good value that I think you should only have him. And the reason I wouldn't double on Brighton attack is, 1, spread of output, but I just don't trust them to score enough goals each and every game whereby this can be justified. I also don't think I've seen like a João Pedro Matoma combination many times, if at all, this season. So you're not like going to double there. You would need quite a few goals. Like, for example, Saka and Gabriel, they've combined so many times this season, but Matoma João Pedro doesn't really look on the cards as much. I know you're going to reference the Bournemouth goal, and that was a brilliant goal, but I think that's the only time it's happened this season. I also don't trust him as much as I have done in the past. I don't think he's looked as good this year as he has in the past. I also don't think he's like a winger who's going to have a level of output specifically relating to goals, which is huge. Like, whereas Bowen, I can see that happening. Even like Semenyo, I could see that happening. Odegaard's interesting, right? Arsenal, in my opinion, the next 5 games are going to come against 5 deeper low blocks, which is great for him in terms of performance because, as I referred to him as a couple of times, a low block slayer. Arsenal have looked so much better with him in the sides as a result. However, he has a variety of responsibilities, and one is dropping in and helping with early stage build-up, dropping into that second phase, getting things going. Saka's the guy they look to I guess, take dominion over the creativity as opposed to Odegaard. And if Odegaard is to feed someone, it's more likely to be Saka than anyone else, just given the type of runs Havertz is making at the moment. Is often like the runs he's making are the ones that like Trossard found him with. Whereas I think with when Odegaard's in like pockets of small spaces, Havertz isn't making a little dash across the last line. He's kind of holding a space, waiting for a cross. And I think Saka's far more suited to putting those in, just given positioning and a variety of other things. He's also pretty expensive, and I think he's taking far less shots than he has done in the past, whereas you would see the traditional Odegaard smack from outside the box, which rifles into the bottom corner. I think we're seeing that less and less this year, so I would say the goal threat's down, and he's pretty expensive. So in terms of opportunity cost, I think you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot there. So for me, Bowen, and I don't think it's that close. Right, so I've got all the forwards of note here that I felt that needed to be discussed, and I would just go through one by one. I would 100% keep Solanke if he's fit. I've talked about it so many times, and it keeps happening game after game after game. Central attacking players against Bournemouth, they're the ones you want. I think it's because, like, when they initially play with their 4-2-3-1 and the way they press with their fullbacks and they're so aggressive and they go up the pitch, all the space is left in the middle because the 10 almost has to follow as well. And then you can transition on them from there. And it's the central players that are always going to profit. I also think 1v1, their fullbacks are pretty good, so it's hard to basically go past them essentially when they're deeper as well. And I think as a result, it's always the players in the middle that profit. I mean, João Pedro, even Matoma's goal was from like the inside area. Fran Larson, and there's just been so many examples. And if Son's fit, I wouldn't sell him for Saka. Oh, sorry. If Solanke's not fit and Son is, then I wouldn't sell Son for Saka because Son will play at 9, and I really like that prospect. Sell Isak. So I think this is got nothing to do with football. Well, not nothing, but not much to do with football. I think it's more to do with your strategy, your outlook, how you play the game, your philosophy, your tendency for risk, etc., etc. He has Liverpool at home, which is not a good fixture, right? And he might be injured for it. Let's just say, because like it's a Saturday, Wednesday turnaround, right? He misses the game. Okay, fine. Then he gets reintegrated into the Brentford game, but he doesn't play 90, and Callum Wilson's there, so he has reduced expected minutes. You could basically have Rodgers. I'm just going to use Rodgers as an example because he's a lot of people's 8th player. Rodgers for 60, 70, 80, 90, you don't know, versus Brentford, and Isak for 70 versus Brentford as well. Or you could have anyone else for maybe like 80-80 split across the two, and better fixtures. And they'll potentially be in better form. For me, this is a sell. It's not going to be a case for all of you where you can afford this luxury to sell him and then maybe get him back in 16-17 because the fixtures are so good. Some of you will want Cunha in 16-17. Some of you want both. Actually, I actually hadn't thought about us getting both, but I don't think I'll do that because I think Jackson and João Pedro are locked. So let's just assume you can only have one. I personally think this is more of a sell if you are in a luxurious position, right? Because just because you're in a luxurious position doesn't mean you should act on it. But in this case, for me personally, I'm going to sell him this week. I'm quite confident, and you'll see that in the team selection. Who I go for is something we'll come on to. Jackson, I've expressed it so many times, and there's a reason he was in tier 1.5 all alone. I'm not worried about the 4 cards, because if he gets the 5th, okay, so be it. We all have depth anyway, pretty much by this point. We're all off Haaland. I'm not worried about rotation because I really don't like what I see from Nkunku at 9. Performances have actually frustrated me a little bit. And I don't think Moresa's going to just play him for the sake of it, right? We're in such good form. We have literally nothing else to worry about apart from like the FA Cup. Okay, fine, the Conference League, but that's just the 18B team. So just let us keep going in the league and just don't let up. It's not like Jackson's playing a lot of games this year. He literally just has to play the Prem and basically nothing else. Like literally nothing else. So just let him keep going. Okay, fine, it's one midweek game. Players play midweek games in Champions League clubs all the time. He'll need to get used to that for next season. So I don't think he's dropped or rotated. He's in great form, and he's got a good floor because of the chances that Chelsea create for him. He's got a good ceiling because of the chances that Chelsea create for him and his form. And then I've obviously spoken about Nkunku. So I think from a stylistic standpoint as well, Spurs in 15 is great. Scored a hat-trick there last year, obviously in very interesting circumstances, but it's a good fixture for him regardless. The fixture run extends for such a long period of time, and it is Southampton without Harwood Bellis, which is a big deal, and without Finn Downs, and without their keeper, so first choice keeper, and without arguably their best player. So yeah, for me, this is a slam dunk as you're going to get in the forwards. I don't know how you can justify anyone over him at the moment in the forward category, not even João Pedro. Ollie Watkins, well, this will just be an in and out for me. 14-15, Brentford at home, Southampton at home. Thank you very much. I'll take the upside. But is it there? They're still creating chances for him. They create chances for him against Chelsea. And that's definitely a harder game than Brentford or Southampton will be. And it was away. If his finishing was better, let's say he just puts that first chance away, which I think he'll be upset at the fact he didn't, frustrated because he's a player more than good enough putting that away. all of a sudden it looks so different about Watkins. Oh, he's picked up some form. Oh, he's got 2 great fixtures. Oh, he'll be a differential. And the narrative's so different. I'm just going to assume that, like, on another day, he puts that away and he's going into this with some confidence. I don't really see why he shouldn't be so confident anyway. Like, look what he did last year. Look at the player he is. Both the fixtures are at home. He'll need to get back to some form of scoring because Aston Villa are slowly starting to trickle down the table, which is becoming ultra competitive this year. And like I said, I just want to take on the upside. I accept the risk of maybe slightly reduced expected minutes. I don't think he's benched. There's no way I think you can bench him when you're in this type of form. And I think he's looked fine himself. I don't think he's the problem at all. So for me, I like Ollie Watkins. And if you've got the capabilities to go there, then by all means do. If I don't go there, I'll go to Cunha. I didn't like the Everton fixture, but I was just thinking they just lost 4-0. Yeah. Maybe that I'm going to buy into that a little. West Ham away, whilst I wouldn't have him for that initially in the plan, it's not exactly the worst fixture in the world. And then it's Ipswich, Leicester, or Leicester, Ipswich. But if he plays in this 4 again, I won't be so happy. I'm going to find out if Wolves are likely to play a 4 again. And then that will certainly help my decision. But I am leaning towards Ollie Watkins. Chris Wood has been magnificent for so many of you. You've almost got like 100x. It's like buying Bitcoin at $1. But there's so many other good options with just better fixtures. I just think take the profits and go, right? Like every single one of these guys mentioned has better fixtures. So yeah, just take it and go, and you can just get him back later. Van Nistelrooy's really interesting. I don't think he's the highest seeding player in the world because I haven't seen this ruthless finishing tied to him. But the fixtures are there. He's involved in so much. He's obviously very, very capable of generating assists and a return in the game. So I like it. I don't have anything negative to say. If you're that bullish on him, then go there. I think it's justified. Finally, we turn to 2 players who performed magnificently well at Anfield yesterday. And I know Salah got man of the match, but for me, it was a clear Van Dijk. Like, that performance yesterday, monstrous, pocketed Haaland for the whole game. And I very rarely speak like that, but he was unbelievable yesterday. And he's just the best defender in the world. And he's just the best defender this planet's ever seen. And honestly, I don't even think it's that close. What a footballer. He also could have had a hat-trick yesterday, right? Ortega makes an unreal save for the first one, which goes onto the post. He should score the second one, and I think he knew it. You could see in his reaction. Even the third one, which he glances at the front post, I think he got up high enough whereby he should be directing that towards goal. Not the easiest chance, but I think he'll know that. He probably should have done a little bit better. And with the way Liverpool are defending, with the way the system's different to Klopp's, with the significantly reduced risk, with the lesser ability for other teams to hurt them on transition, resultant of all the variables we've spoken about this season, and the fixture run's pretty decent after Newcastle. The clean sheets are there, the upside's there, and I think I really, really like Virgil van Dijk as an option. So if you want to go there and look for a bit more security in your defense, and you're happy to facilitate a cheaper option in the midfield or forward line because you're bullish on them there, I think fine. Trent, for me, is like more upside, more downs, or not even more upside necessarily. You just have to assume that he gets a lot of open play returns to justify a huge price tag in relative terms. The thing with him is obviously playing a different role, and it's certainly hurting his output. Obviously, yesterday he could have had a bunch of returns, but that hasn't been the case in every game this season. He's also coming off around 70, and that's great for clean sheets, but you're taking out like 70, 80-ish. Conor Bradley is injured, but he was still happy to put Quansah on in that type of game at 1-0. So I think that kind of sums it up, that like he's more than happy to take Trent off in those moments. And that's definitely taken away from his potential upside because he's just not on the pitch, right? So I think there's a lot of downside attached to Trent given the price and opportunity cost resultant of it. So for me, Virgil van Dijk going forward, I like people speak about Joe Gomez, but I just think Van Dijk's goal threat is there. And if he gets 1, that's plus like 2 bonus, let's say 8 points, some more than makes up for that 1.2 million in my opinion. The rest of the defense, if you're looking at options, Colwell, I think, was a magnificent option to get. Less so now because Fofana's out, and I don't think we're going to be as good because of that. Maresca even spoke about it. It's a big blow. It really is. Like, Fofana's been good. And I think they've got a brilliant relationship. I also think he's very aggressive, and he's got a big spring on him. And I think those are 2 things which are very helpful when playing in a system like this and the role he has to do week in, week out. So I'm not as confident in Chelsea now doing as well. But it's still a decent option with the fixtures, and it's not like we're going to fall off a cliff, right, because of this injury. Timber, you probably wait a week, and then from there, I like it. I'm just wondering a little bit more about the opportunity cost now. The only reason I'm not as high is when Van Dijk exists at that price point, potentially better fixtures. Is it worth spending the money? Maybe. So slightly lower on Timber, just slightly. But I still really like him for all of the reasons discussed previously. Wan-Bissaka / Emerson. I wouldn't just be getting Wan-Bissaka because he's returned recently, obviously with 2 goals. I like Emerson a bit more. Like, you saw the free kick he scored. At least he's going to have free kicks. At least he'll have some set pieces. For me, if you're going to go for one of them, I like Emerson. I think the fixtures are there. Whether they can keep clean sheets, honestly, I wouldn't be too surprised if they can. I think when they get out in front, they probably do lock up a little bit. And they have shown some ability to perform in a deeper block. I just don't like Paquetá, Sule, Souček as a midfield composition in this league. Maybe he changed it, maybe he doesn't. That remains to be seen. But I think Emerson's okay, and at least it provides you with good fixtures week on week. Van Heck, obviously on the cheaper side compared to the likes of Timber. The fixtures are decent. I wouldn't say they're great, just with the way that Brighton play. I think you're hoping for a clean sheet as opposed to expecting one. And as long as you know that and know the risk associated to having the quote-unquote good fixtures, I think are ever so slightly a facade on the FDR. That's good. But for me, I probably prefer like a Cobble and maybe even an Emerson. And that is all she wrote for today, ladies and gentlemen. I shall see you tomorrow for the team selection and solving your problems. So make sure to comment below what you would like to be discussed that I haven't maybe covered or that you need specifically, because that's what I try to do in solving your problems. I do really try to look at the more micro level things for your specific team as opposed to macro level, like I do in this video. And yeah, very close to 5,000 subscribers. So if you are one of the regular viewers who haven't subscribed, if you could just check, I would be greatly appreciative if you could press the button once doing so, if you have not already. And if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. Like the video if you enjoy. Thank you so much for the support on the channel recently. I shall see you tomorrow in less than 24 hours. Goodbye and make it a great day.